Hello and welcome back to the Stacey West YouTube channel, and welcome to another monthly show. The month of January is over. The transfer window has slammed shut. Slammed shut last night, actually. If you didn't watch a Deadline Day special that was on this channel, it was rather fun. And part of that team last night, and of course part of the regular monthly show team, Chris Lamming. How are we doing, sir?
Hello, mates. I'm tired. I'm tired. Last night, yeah. So for that, don't know what day everyone's watching this. We're recording this on the 2nd of February, Friday, the day after transfer deadline day, of course. And we did our live show, as you mentioned, our live stream, 4 hours long. Loved every second of it. Thank you so much to everyone who watched it. It was just such a privilege, really. But it was a late one, and I also do the Football Manager video game data for Lincoln City, and that all needed submitting by lunchtime today as well. So I've been a busy boy. I've had my real job to do around that as well. So, but looking forward to this. Always look forward to this every time of the month. It always seems to come around so quickly, doesn't it?
It really, really does. It's kind of crazy when so many things have changed. I'm like, hang on a minute, we're not at a month already. But it's really, really enjoyed doing this as well. And let's be honest, Chris, I'm assuming your real life job took a bit of a backseat because the Football Manager stuff and the Stacey West stuff, that has to take priority, obviously.
Well, considering this is going to be out publicly, then absolutely no, not. It did not take a backseat at all. I was doing my proper job all the time, as much as I definitely should have been.
So we won't talk about the fact that you were supposed to finish at 1 o'clock, but I was getting Y-Scout information before. But we won't go into too much detail there because we don't want to get Chris in trouble. But yeah, let's crack on, Chris, because we've got so much to talk about. And of course, the first thing is to have a look at January's results. There we go then. On screen are our 4 results from the month of January. I don't think I've made any mistakes in there. It is 1 loss, 3 draws. Do you know what? It looks a little bit bleak when you're looking at that on paper, doesn't it, Chris? 1 goal scored in the whole month, 3 goals conceded, not a single win. You know, that winless run's stretching out a little bit, but it really isn't as kind of doom and gloom as that might suggest, is it?
Yeah, it's interesting because football's a results business, isn't it? And ultimately, results is what matters. But I think there's more to it than that this time round. Well, we recorded the last monthly show. I seem to remember the day before the Blackpool game, and we both said the amount of players that were out at the time, unavailable or not back in the club, or not signed yet, of course. We kind of wrote that game off, and we actually started okay. We had some decent spells in it, but we came out on the wrong side of the result. But we expected to be honest. It was almost like that Blackpool game was a bit of a sideshow before the transfer window opened, really, wasn't it? And then I think the key point here is the gap between Blackpool and Wycombe. There's 12 days there, and in that 12 days, Rico Hacket was available again. Freddie Draper returned. Joe Taylor was brought in as well, and we just had a real different feel about us from the Wycombe game onwards. Really, the first half against Wycombe, let's be honest, wasn't superb, but I think certainly the second half, and then certainly the Derby and the Peterborough games, there's been a real shift in system, style, output, and in the last 3 games, we've our XG has been well over 1 in all 3 games, and we're unlucky to only get 1 goal from those 3 games. But when Mark Kennedy was in charge and a few weeks before he was sacked, we discussed the stats. We were performing all right in the league, but the underlying numbers suggested that we were going to drop down the league. With this, it's the other way around. The results aren't quite there yet, but the underlying numbers suggest that we're on the right path. And if we use the same mentality that we used then it would suggest that results aren't far away, because performances are definitely there. We've held Derby and Peterborough. We were arguably the better team in both those games against 2 of the teams that are pushing for automatic promotion this season. They're really good sides, really, really strong sides. And we limited them to very, very little. And we created the better chances ourselves in both those games. So we are so close. So yeah, just 3 points to show from 4 matches isn't great, but I think the intangibles there and also the underlying numbers suggest that we ain't far away now. I'm super excited for February, I have to say. I feel like it's a real key month for us.
I definitely agree. And I think picking up on the first, sort of taking it slightly game by game, Blackpool, I agree. We wrote it off this time last month. We really did. And it's a weird one because I think that Blackpool game, as much as it was a league match and you want points on the board and all that, kind of felt like the last friendly that you have every pre-season. It's normally down at Sinsel Bank. You're normally playing a team from sort of up in the Championship or higher. And it's kind of, you want to just see a bit of a performance, but you're not really that bothered about the result. It's kind of just a good chance just to see everybody down at the ground again. And there's nothing really riding on it. And to me, that is what Blackpool felt like. It felt like this really weird free hit. Like, we're going into the game expecting to lose. Anything better is a massive bonus. Even if we got a draw out of that, it would have been huge. And I still came away a little bit disappointed. I remember being up in Black, and it's like, it's just a bit deflated. But then at the same time, I'm thinking, I wasn't expecting any different. It just doesn't really matter. It's not even a game where I thought we could at best get anything out of it. And maybe that's a really defeatist attitude. I don't know. But that is kind of the way I was looking at it. And then you look at some of the other matches. Now, I hoped for 4 points from this month. We got 3 because I was kind of hoping for a victory against Wickham and then a point picked up out of either Derby or Peterborough. But I actually think 3 points is fantastic. I made a comment at half-time of the Wickham match. I was talking to some people down at Adams Park, and we're kind of discussing this shift in sort of system and mentality because we had this sort of new look side for that Wickham game. Transition, it's not going to happen immediately. We were on 0 down in that game in the first half, and it wasn't the greatest first half of football that we've played all season anywhere, nowhere near it. And one of the biggest things I was worried about was the fact that our kind of bedding in games were against some of the best teams in the league in Derby and Peterborough, and obviously the second half of Wickham as well, from the point where I was making that comment. And I was kind of really worried how deflated, and to be fair, how much the fans may end up getting on the backs of Skubala and his new system and Freddie Draper coming in and Joe Taylor coming in, for example, and actually how detrimental that could end up being to the rest of the season. But we've somehow managed to flip that totally on its head, be able to have 2 standout performances against 2 of the best teams in the league, and now we need to build on it. It's funny, that we've got Peterborough coming up on Saturday, and obviously we'll talk through the fixtures that we've got for February. But we've got, I said Peterborough, we've got Burton Albion away on Saturday. And it's kind of funny because last Christmas, there was again this sort of period where we'd not done too amazingly in the lead up to the kind of festive fixtures. And didn't necessarily do amazingly during them. But we got 2 points against Ipswich and Bolton. And the comments around the time were, well, those 2 points are great in isolation, but they need to be backed up by victories either side. So, for example, when we had Burton Albion on Boxing Day, losing that game and then only picking up 2 points from Ipswich and Bolton then meant we got 2 points out of a possible 9, and it would have been less than what people would have hoped for. And it's kind of similar with this. These draws, these results are fine, and the performances are great, and it's showing that we're moving in the right direction. But they need to be backed up by wins so that we can create a run going rather than the winless run that we're currently on. Because I think 1 or 2 more draws, even though they are good performances, suddenly people do start to get worried. And I think it's only fair that they do.
Yeah, no one. Well, you mentioned the Blackpool game there about expectations. Like, you still, even though we went in with 0 expectations, you still felt deflated. That's because no one likes to see Lincoln City lose. No matter even if we expect it, we don't enjoy it. And you can look at the bigger picture all you like. And I like to think that's something that we discussed quite a bit. And you and I are probably on the same wavelength here. We tend to be reasonably adept at looking at that bigger picture. But sometimes I think, and I'll put myself in this category here, I can be guilty of looking at the bigger picture, but almost ignoring the short term sometimes. And yeah, we haven't won for a long time, not since November. So wins are really important. We are 3 points ahead of Burton. We're a few points away from getting dragged into anything relegation-wise. I think we're all looking at this point in the lead up to February, thinking we've got some real big opportunities here to get some points on the board and start looking upwards again. But yeah, of course, is the pessimistic side of us, the glass half empty side is going to we're looking over our shoulder at the moment and thinking, in isolation, they are fantastic performances, and they really are. I came out of both those games absolutely buzzing. But let's just temper that a little bit. Yeah, we need a bloody win, don't we? We need a win, and we need to just be able to start looking upwards rather than start looking over our shoulders. Because if we do have a couple more games without a win, then it's going to start to really impact probably the mentality a little bit. Because I think there seems to be a real positive mentality in the club at the moment. I think a bit of a refresh in the squad helps that to an extent. But of course, if this group of players have a continuous run of not winning, then that's going to have a huge impact. I've been part of teams myself where you're on a bad run, and as soon as you concede a goal, your heads go down, and trying to score a goal, the opposition goal feels like it's the size of a hockey net, and it's like it doesn't matter how hard you try, the goal gets smaller and smaller. But I get that mentality, completely get it. I can't help but feel really positive at the moment, particularly because of the last two performances. Like you say, in isolation, yeah, they're great, but also points-wise, it's not great. But I'm going to go back to the stats because that's my favourite thing to do. The underlying numbers suggest that we should have won both those games. They really do. And that's not just me having rose-tinted glasses. That is just hard facts. And yeah, again, in isolation, you can see that's an anomaly, but that's a pattern forming there. And if that pattern continues, then generally speaking, what will happen is that those numbers will even out with the reality as well. So that would all indicate that against weaker opposition, we've got all the tools that we need to be able to put the ball in the net and start to move up the table. So yeah, I completely get the concern, absolutely, but I can't help but feel super positive.
Now, for the record, I am with you, and I do feel positive in sort of what the future's holding in terms of the rest of this season and what we could create next season. But to kind of temper that, and to be fair, I'm probably going to be sounding like the pessimist on today's monthly show, and I don't necessarily mean to be. I don't mean to be a bit of a downer, but you mentioned there Cambridge, and that was our last win. At the end of November, that was a 3-0 victory where it really looked like we were turning the corner. We'd got victories against Leyton Orient. Was the victory against Leyton Orient before that? I'm trying to remember. Or was it after?
I think it was before. It was
yes.
Wins.
No, because the
Orient, then Barnsley draw, and then Cambridge win.
Right. So there you go. So that they were very much 3 matches where it really looked like we were turning a corner in the sense that we got a victory down at Leyton Orient when, as much as we don't necessarily like talking about the first match at Leyton Orient, that was kind of a real sort of key moment because it showed that we were winning a game that prior we were losing. There was also a 2-2 draw at home to Barnsley that really showed an attacking intent, especially when we went 2-1 down later on in the game. And then there was obviously the game against Cambridge where it just looked like an all-out attacking side that was working and was flowing. And that was brilliant. And I'll be honest, I was really pleased. Now I'm sat there after Cambridge. I'm thinking, you know what? Let's get a few more points, get a couple more wins, get into January, and look where we could end up being if we strengthen the squad. Then December, it kind of went a little bit downhill. And obviously January wasn't exactly the best month in terms of points return either. Now, I'm not saying that the performances haven't picked up because they certainly haven't. We also know what the issues were in December in terms of our injury list. Was it 11 players out during that Blackpool game once Lass Sorensen went off injured?
Yeah, I believe so.
It's terrible numbers, and it kind of doesn't excuse bad results, but it does definitely explain them and kind of gives a reason and a factor. But I'm sat here trying not to get carried away by kind of comparing these last 3 results, if you like, back to that little run of Leyton Orient, Barnsley and Cambridge.
That's a good point. Yeah, it's a good point because, like you say, we probably had a similar amount of positivity at that point. And then we went on a challenging run. I actually think the next game after Cambridge, the 0-0 away at Wigan, was a really good performance despite... But it certainly wasn't anywhere near as exciting or as front foot as the Cambridge game was. So, but you're absolutely right, of course. We've almost been here before, haven't we? But I also think that's what makes, as much as looking at February, and we're going to look ahead to February, of course, later today, I am excited about it. I am positive about it. It adds a bit of pressure, though, doesn't it? Because they're very different games than Derby and Peterborough, aren't they? You know, let's be honest, this is something that we were able to do under Mark Kennedy. We were able to compete with the bigger teams in the league. Of course, we didn't create anywhere near as much against the bigger teams as we did against Derby and Peterborough this time round. We had a far greater attacking threat against them than we would have done under Mark Kennedy. But there's no denying, results-wise, it's the same, isn't it? We were able to compete with those teams. The challenge that we've had all season, and arguably all last season, is breaking down those teams who are going to be slightly less attack-orientated and slightly less strong on an offensive side of things, and are likely to, particularly for our home games, likely to come to Sincil Bank and be hard to beat and to play slightly deeper and to not allow that space in behind that we've been able to exploit a little bit against Peterborough and Derby. Those types of games are different, and they are the test. So, with the realists head on, coming out of these two games feeling super positive, and still am, but they are going to be different games now. These next 6 games or so in February are going to be different. They're going to have a very different feel to them. But I do feel that we are far better equipped now in both personnel and in terms of system and style to come out on the right side of those sort of games compared to how we were set up to deal with that sort of game 6 months ago, let's say. I completely get why you're not getting carried away. I am a bit. I am at the moment. I can't help but still come out of this feeling positively. Even though I completely understand that pessimism and that. It's not pessimism. It's concern, isn't it? It's concern. It's concern that's based upon, facts. To be honest. So it makes total sense. But like I said before, just the indicators for me are there that we have turned a corner now. It's as much as we had some good performances earlier in the season. You mentioned the Cambridge game there. It was good results. The Cambridge performance was a standout performance. The other ones were just positive results, weren't they? But personnel is different now as well. System is different now. So I think what we did in those games is we did what we used to do well. We executed the previous game plan well. Whereas now we've got a new game plan. We've got a new system. We've got a new style, which in my opinion better equips us for breaking down those teams that are going to be slightly harder to play against and going to be playing slightly deeper. I also think our current system and style does actually just give us a little bit more balance than we maybe had before. Maybe those days were like just the best version of us at the time, and you can't achieve that every week. Of course you can't. Whereas now, hopefully, fingers crossed, we've got this new system, which is a step forward. Basically, it's just a progression, or as Michael Scubala would like to say, an evolution. Rather than a revolution, part of our evolution.
I 100% agree, especially on the comment that we are much better equipped now to kind of deal with making sure that this little run certainly isn't just a one-off and we can continue it over the next month. And look, one of the things we've alluded to quite heavily in that discussion is a change in system and a change in style. So why don't we get the tactics board up and have a look at exactly what that looks like. And here we go then. On screen now is that tactics board. Now, some people would be very, very pleased to see a 4-4-2 on their screens. I mean, it's not that often that we've got to be able to talk about a 4-4-2 at Lincoln City in the last couple of years, Chris, is it? Now, first of all, are you going to ruin people's days by saying, actually, this isn't a 4-4-2? And having it as some wacky 2-2-2-2-2, or are you going to put some people's minds at ease and say that we're just going 4-4-2, Sean Dyche, smack the ball up top? And actually, no, that's unfair on Sean Dyche because his football's a lot more, what's the word? A lot more intelligent
nuanced
than that. But yes. But are we just playing Brexit ball?
No, we're not. Not at all. Certainly not in possession. So this is half of our system. We have got 2 shapes, and we'll go through both of them on the screen now and kind of see how we morph. And against some oppositions, we are in this 4-4-2 shape out of possession. This was apparent against Derby and Wickham. Against Peterborough, our out of possession shape was a bit more the back 5/3. but we generally switch in and out of this 4-4-2 shape to a 3-5-2 shape that I will take you through in a moment. The key player really is it's the two players, so it's two fullbacks and the right midfielder. So on this screen, it's the 3, the 2, and the 7. So out of possession against Wycombe and Derby, this is how we are. We're a 4-4-2 block. So the right midfielder, whoever this may be, will be pressing the opposition fullback. In possession, though, what we need to happen, so we have a traditional winger on the left-hand side who will push forwards here. Ethan Arahan's sitting. Whoever's playing next to him tends to push a little higher. And this player here on the right of midfield is certainly not a traditional right midfielder by any way, shape or form. They will generally start to tuck into here. So you've seen in the last couple of games, Ethan Hamilton doing this role. Against Wycombe, Lasse Sorensen started in this role, thought he was okay. Ted Bishop came on in this role, and I thought he was superb. And then our right wing back, who since that swap against Wycombe midway through the second half, and then starting against both Derby, Lasse was playing in what I think is his best and long-term position as a really attacking right back. And what happens is our back three will shift. Sean Rowan at the left back here tucks in, and we're looking something similar to a 3. This sort of shape, like a 3-3-4 or a 3-2-5. Most teams tend to be in their attacking phase. Most teams will tend to be a 2-3-5 or 3-2-5 in their attacking phase, generally speaking. But ultimately, we have our left winger in our back midfield 4 playing as a traditional left winger, but it's actually our right back that's now in this right wing position, and the person that was at right wing tucks inside and creates that extra man in midfield. So that's kind of our shape. I'd say it's maybe more like this, if I'm honest, more like a 3-5-2, I suppose, to make it slightly more obvious in this regard here. That's kind of what we're looking like. So against Peterborough, we was in this 3-5-2 shape here quite a bit for the majority of the game. We were defending as a 5, like so. But it's so great to have this tactical flexibility that we can just shift in and out in different phases of the game. I think it's superb. It shows some real intelligence on the training ground. But I also don't think it's being fancy for the sake of being fancy, because what a manager's job is, if we're breaking it down to the simplest of terms, is their job is to get the best out of their players, isn't it? It's to create a system and a plan to nullify the weaknesses and to almost hide and protect the weaknesses of their team, and also to of course, enhance the strengths. I think the fact we've got 2 superstar centre forwards now, 2 centre forwards who were sought after by half the teams in this league, had 2 great seasons so far. First half of the seasons in League 2, in Freddie Draper and Joe Taylor. And of course, we've got a returning Ben House to add into that mix as well. Playing with 2 up top when you've got some real threat up there now, which is a real novelty for us, isn't it? Makes total sense. Ethan Arahan sitting in his deeper role makes total sense. We've got a box-to-box all-action player in Ethan Hamilton. And then we've got a slightly more of a ball player that's in this kind of hybrid floaty role here. Of course, we know the strength of our back line. We've got Alex Mitchell and Adam Jackson have been there recently since Paudie's sending off, but Paudie, of course, can definitely fit into those 2 roles. Key for this, though, in my opinion, a real key player who hasn't maybe been given the credit he deserves yet is young Sean Rowan, who's playing in this hybrid left back in a 4 role, but also left centre back when we move into that 3-5-2. So I think we all know that Sean, when he was playing at left wing back last season, it was great to have him in the team. He had some defensive, certainly his one-on-one defending was his biggest attribute, in my opinion. But I think we all know that he does have some attacking limitations. He's not going to go past a man. He's not going to, he's got a decent delivery as and when, but he hasn't got the vision or that kind of cuteness in his passing to try and break lines. That's not his game. His game is a really good defender, a left-footed defender. So if we have him playing left back in a 4, that protects a really attacking left winger in Rico Hacket and or Dylan Duffy. And it also means that if we are in this shape here where he tucks in here, it just protects him. But also tucking in here, because I think we can probably say that Lasse's strengths are in the attacking third rather than defensive third. He's certainly competent defensively, but we all want to see Lasse bombing on down this right side. Well, by Sean being much more reserved and holding his position on the left-hand side, that then allows Lass to really get forward on the right-hand side. So I think the current shape that we have just really, really allows our best players to use their best attributes. And I've been really impressed with it, and I think it's a really clever system. There's one role at the moment. We're going to touch on this later, I'm sure, but there's one role which I think just doesn't quite have a square peg in a square hole just yet, which is this right midfield role. I think this one's up for grabs still because it's kind of right midfield, it's kind of central midfield, and maybe it's different. You want a different profile of player there. The rest of them for me are pretty much nailed down, but that's the only one really for me where there's a little bit of a question mark. But if you've got 10 out of 11 players on a team which are playing in their roles which suit their attributes so they can perform to their kind of fullest, I think that's really smart. Think of how many square pegs in round holes we had in the lead up to January compared to where we are now. So yeah, I'm super impressed with this and super pleased with it. And this adds to my confidence as to why I'm going into February feeling really positive, to be honest.
I do 100% agree, and it is a really smart, really clever tactic and the best use of the players we've got, I think. And it's a tactic similarly to what I used on Football Manager with Lincoln. So basically, Michael Skubala asked me the best way to get this Lincoln team playing. That's what
I think what was really interesting, genuinely, at the start of the season, we were just obviously both you and I are big fans of the game. And there's a new role that came onto the game this year, the inverted fullback. So, of course, it's not like a left back or right back that's pushing into midfield like Man City tended to play at the time. This is more about someone who's a back four, but they then took in basically the Sean Rowan role as he's doing now. And both you and I said, oh, that would suit Sean Rowan perfectly. I want to create a tactic which uses Sean Rowan in that role. And I was like, oh, let's get Lass at right back, and then he can bomb on. So the rest of it isn't quite the same for me, but I definitely had a back four that was built in this way. So basically, you and I should be in charge.
100%. I think my phone is currently going crazy. Skubala's asking me how we play against Burton. All of these things. But obviously, sort of joking aside, this is a system that gets the best out of the players that we've got, and I think that's the key. Because so much this season we have been talking about sort of square pegs in round holes and vice versa, because we have struggled to get the most out of some of our players. Look at Dylan Duffy, for example. Dylan Duffy, for me, is such a phenomenal young talent that we've got in our squad. The only problem was we've not really played a position that suits him in terms of a proper out-and-out left winger role. That we had him at left wing back, for example, against Cambridge. But my only problem was I pointed out in that game that he got beaten far too often one-on-one defensively, because that was also our out of possession shape as well. He got beaten one-on-one defensively far too many times, which meant that Cambridge were able to get balls in the box. Now, granted, they didn't do anything with them, but I think that was less because of sort of our strength at the back in that particular game, more because of their weaknesses going forward.
Yeah, could I just add something on to that? Because I think that's a really interesting point, because I think he was selected in that role in that game because we went out to win the game. I think we would say, well, it's worth taking the risk of his defensive limitations because we think he could add something going forward, and was hoping to pin Cambridge in and to really kind of assert ourselves on the game. But you're right. Let's be honest, as much as it worked in that game overall, he didn't have a really good game going forward. It did expose his weaknesses. And I know, would I have been comfortable with him playing in that role against a derby, for example? Then obviously not. Whereas in this system, certainly with a 4-4-2 out of possession shape, those one-on-one defending, if you play one-on-one, if you're in a back five, it's the wing back that's defending one-on-one against the opposition winger. Whereas in a back four, in this shape, even though it's the same, it could potentially be the same 11 players on the pitch. It's Sean Rowan that's doing that one-on-one defending. We know that's what he's good at. I think he was superb on Saturday against David Ajiboye on that side. So I think it is, in that regard, this protects that, because it means that you get the benefit of their strengths, but you've got that extra protection and it hides their weaknesses a little bit. So sorry, I interrupted you there, but I thought it was worth pointing out.
No, that is 100% true. And I think this system, for example, if we're going to play Dylan Duffy, and we were playing Dylan Duffy in the same sort of out of possession and in possession shapes that we were more against Derby and Wickham in that kind of Rico Hacket role, allowing him to get forward on a consistent basis and not having to rely on him defensively out of possession. I actually think he'd be perfect for that role. But then at the same time, you can't really drop Rico Hacket because God, have we missed him. And God, has he been a revelation since coming back. And it's one of those where actually you don't realise how much you've missed someone like a Rico Hacket until they're back. And it's fantastic to kind of have this team back playing the way they are. And obviously, like you say, you mentioned that right midfield role is probably the one role at the minute that, like you say, that there's still a kind of major discussion about who's best in that position. Now, we've actually got differing opinions on that, but we're gonna can that discussion for a minute, because what we'll do is then, Chris, if there's nothing else to say on the tactics board, which I don't believe there is, let's dive straight back into our best 11s. So, Chris, on screen is your best 11 that you've told me. So I hope again I've got it right. Let's just take us through it. Now, I'm not don't spoil the changes, because you know what changes I've made, but don't spoil the changes as of yet. But tell me who you've picked, but why.
Okay. Well, we'll start at the back. Lucas Jensen in goal. He's our best goalkeeper. That's that. Right back, Lars Sorensen. Again, we're assuming it's 4-4-2 on the screen, but we're assuming we are still adopting that 3-5-2 shape in possession. So Lass will be bombing on really high down the right-hand side. So for me, I think he's an absolute no-brainer in that role. And I've just explained why I think Sean Rowan really suits that left-back / left centre-half role in our current system. There's no one else that can do that. I think that's quite key, actually, is that, yeah, we would probably have to shift our system a little bit if Sean Rowan did get injured, but he's not injured. He's great. He's fit, so he plays. And then Jacko and Mitchell have been just absolutely phenomenal in the last 3 games. Both of them have been absolutely phenomenal. They've been brick walls, really, haven't they? They've been superb. So even though Paudie O'Connor, of course, is available this Saturday and he's the club captain, I personally feel that we don't change the lineup. I think that Jackson and Mitchell have been absolutely outstanding. So that's that. Rico Hacket to start in the left wing role. Dylan Duffy is a super exciting player, and I think he can come off the bench and be really, really effective for us. But I think Hacket is just that bit more complete at the moment, a bit more rounded, offers a little bit more composure as well. So I think we get the best version of Lincoln City with Rico Hacket in the side, and this probably plays to his strengths. A midfield pairing of Ethan Arahan, who's going to be holding the fort in that slightly deeper role, and then Hamilton in that slightly more kind of aggressive box-to-box, higher press role. Now, of course, in the last couple of games, it's been Ethan Hamilton that's played in that wide right role that tucks inside with Bishop next to Arahan. And this is quite a difficult decision for me, to be honest, because I like the benefits of having Ted in there, deeper, more comfortable on the ball. I think we mentioned, we all know how good Ethan Hamilton is, but we also probably all know that his best attributes isn't actually his passing. He's hardly a bad passer, but he's all action. He's box to box. He's aggressive, but he's not a composed or kind of that sort of player that's going to slow the game down and going to kind of entice an opponent onto you to press to pick it and then find a through ball. Ethan Hamilton is the one that's going to be the end of that. So the question is, what would you rather have next to Ethan Arahan? Do you want someone who's really comfortable on the ball, or do you want someone who's going to be really good kind of out possession and someone who's going to drive us forward in possession? And then you've got on the right-hand side, you want someone who's going to be able to engage with an opposition fullback, but also in possession, be comfortable drifting inside. And I think it suited Hamilton playing out there, out of possession against good teams, against Derby, against Peterborough, when we needed to really be good defensively to press those fullbacks. But I actually felt that in possession, that role limited him a little bit. I don't think he was quite as effective when we had the ball when he was in that sort of role. So for me, I think I'm going to go with Arahan and Hamilton as our midfield pairing, with Ted then in that kind of inverted right midfield role. I know he said how happy he was to play centrally in his interview after the last game, which I feel a bit bad now, moving him out wide again. But in possession, he is very much an attacking central midfielder in this system. So for me, in terms of getting the most out of the team, I think that's the reason I've gone for that particular selection of those players. And then, of course, Taylor and Draper up top. That's kind of goes without saying at the moment. I think I am in love with Freddie Draper. I think he is absolutely superb. I think he has got just bags of potential. I just think from a defender's perspective, you're just going to hate playing against him. But same can be said for Taylor in a completely different way. They are two completely contrasting centre forwards that are going to be just a nightmare to play against. Someone that's on the shoulder, making loads of runs all the time, and someone that's effectively going to back in, be all elbows, and beat you up. Like it's just going to be a really uncomfortable afternoon if you're a centre half. And yeah, Ben House coming back into the squad is huge. He's not ready to start yet, so that's mine.
Absolutely, and I'm just going to pick up on a couple of things there before we have a look at mine, because I haven't necessarily picked too many different players. But for example, you said that if Rowan was injured for a period of time, then we may have to look at kind of shifting the style and sort of formations that we're playing. I would argue that TJ would be able to suit that role almost perfectly. If TJ was left-footed, I think he would be as good as, if not, some people may even say better than Sean Rowan in that exact same role. Do I think we would need to change the system by just simply replacing Rowan with TJ? I'd argue no, but I would still say that we would be losing something in regards to not having a left footer in that position.
Yeah, I think you're right. If TJ was left footed, then I agree. Yeah, of course, but he isn't. And as much as he was comfortable playing left centre half, I would be uncomfortable him playing. Not uncomfortable. That sounds harsh, but it just certainly wouldn't suit him if in our 4-4-2 shape, because in possession he gets the ball trying to play. Those little clips down the line. It's less natural when you're trying to. Your passing options are limited when you're a right footer playing on the left touch line. Your passing options are limited. So I think if Sean was to become injured, we would be in a 3-5-2 out of possession and in the possession shape. You'd probably lose a little bit of fluidity. But obviously Sean isn't injured. So for me, I really like the 4-4-2 out of possession shape. Yeah. But I just like how the current system just really gets the best out of everyone's strengths, really, on the whole. So yeah, it's a good point. But I don't think that TJ would be a shoe in this system, but it'd be more be a back three out of possession and in possession, I would expect. But hopefully we don't need to find out that Sean's going to be fit for the rest of the season.
It would certainly be nice. And look, let's go on to my team then, because there is actually only one change, and it is potentially a little bit of a controversial change, but we'll get there in a minute. Lucas Jensen obviously hit double digits for clean sheets for the season, as he was discussing on his BBC Radio Lincolnshire interview this week for the pre-match. Really, really impressive. And look, Lucas Jensen, I don't know, when I look on social media, I see a good few comments about people saying he makes them nervous. And obviously there's still this kind of stigma around his distribution. Now, I don't necessarily have the stats with me. And I actually think the distribution stats for a goalkeeper are one of the worst things you can use, because so much of it isn't the goalkeeper's fault. It's the sort of players trying to win the ball whose fault it off the
I suppose well. I am obviously part of the goalkeepers union, so I am going to back Lucas Jensen. He probably kicks one goal kick out of play every game, and it's that one goal kick that goes out of play, which is of course directly his error, and that's what sticks in people's minds. So I get where it comes from. I personally don't think it's a weakness at all. There's no denying he's probably not quite as silky or quite as controlled with his distribution compared to, say, a Cole Rushworth. Cole Rushworth was superb at kind of clipping the ball out to a fullback or to a wing back. I don't think Lucas has quite got that level of accuracy in his locker. What he does have, though, is very good decision making, and he's got very good distance when he does decide to clear the ball. And his short passing is more than adequate as and when required. So I don't think it particularly harms us. But I think it's fair to say that that's not his best attribute. But I think his best attributes of shot stopping, command of his area, is is a real asset to us.
Absolutely. So kind of going on to the defence, I think last, although I've been a little bit disappointed with him in some recent matches, I still think he picks himself for the team. You can't really not be having Lass in that position. Obviously, there is a little bit of competition when you look at maybe a Jack Burrows, but I just don't think he's quite as good as Lass, quite as well-rounded, quite as able going forward as what Lass is. And then Jacko and Mitchell. Look, there's obviously going to be the argument both for and against Paul O'Connor coming back in now that he is sort of free from his suspension, and he is club captain, so there is very much an opportunity for him to get back in the squad within the coming weeks. But I just cannot bring myself to drop either of these two centre-halves at the minute, just because of how outstanding they have been playing. They've been getting the plaudits over the last few weeks, and rightly so. Absolutely fantastic. Sean Rowan, left back, obviously we've spoken at length about him and how he suits that position perfectly and how he's kind of going under the radar for having a really solid season. There was a few kind of games early on where I think he kind of got a little bit of stick, and don't get me wrong, actually, rightly so. I don't think he was at his best, and he'll probably admit that himself. But he's really come on and started to have a really, really strong season, and hopefully the second half of the season he can properly show off what he can do. Rico Hacket, left mid in this sort of 4-4-2 formation. As I've said, really like Dylan Duffy. I think he's got some fantastic raw talent, but I just think that Rico Hacket, like you were kind of saying earlier, Chris, he is just the complete package at the minute in terms of what we want for that position. Not saying that Dylan Duffy can't get to that point, but at the minute, Rico is just slightly ahead of him in that pecking order. Erhan and Hamilton, I mean, those two being in the team, again, they just pick themselves. Like, I'm never going to sit here and have either of them two out as long as they're fit for the next month ahead. They are just two top level central midfielders for our division. Taylor and Draper up top. I'm really skirting around my right midfield at the minute because I know that's where the contentious point is. Taylor and Draper up top. Again, they are our two best fit strikers. They've been fantastic since coming in. Freddie Draper, the way he challenges for balls, I think it's fantastic. He's not just kind of aimlessly either running for a ball or aimlessly just kind of jumping and trying to challenge with sort of an offensive duel against a defender. He's winning a lot of them as well. And Taylor, we know his kind of blistering pace. He's fantastic with that. And he's created so many opportunities out of nothing. The only thing I will say is I think, and providing that this person is fully fit and ready to be starting matches this time next month, don't expect Joe Taylor to be in my squad. Be my best 11 this time next month. Now, of course, there's still time for him to change my mind. But I absolutely love Ben House, and as soon as he is ready to be starting games again, personally, he goes in there next to Freddie Draper. Now, I know what Joe Taylor's pace can bring to the squad and what kind of a difference that can be, but how often, against some of the teams that we're coming up to face, because we have played most of the best teams in the league in terms of league position, played most of them twice now, how many times are we really going to be able to get in behind with a runner like Joe Taylor? Not quite as often as where I think we'll need sort of the fighters and the battlers like a Freddie Draper and a Ben House. And then the contentious one. I've gone Danny Mandroiu on the right midfield. The only reason that I've got Danny Mandroiu, well, it's not the only reason, I just think he's going to be better suited to that kind of position where it can tuck into that number 10 role in possession. And we'll go through in a second and have a look at some of the stats, but then I'm also going to explain some of the intangibles as to why I do think Danny Mandroiu is going to be better than Ted Bishop in there. So yeah, that's kind of what I've gone with as my, well, it's not kind of, that is what I've gone with as my best 11. I understand there's a couple of points I've made there that may be up for debate. And what do you think, Chris?
Oh, I'm going to skirt around Danny Mandroiu first and discuss Ben House because I'm with you in that I'm a huge Ben House fan. I think he's great. And what I think's fantastic here is that we've actually got 3 first-team quality centre forwards that all offer something a little bit different. And that's a novelty, isn't it, to be able to say that this season? But we really have. We've got 3 of them. So Freddie, of course, we know what he's good at. His hold-up play, his link-up play, his real physicality there. We've got Taylor for his pacing behind and finishing ability kind of as a poacher, as much as we haven't quite seen that yet. We've seen the chances that he can create himself. Then you got Ben House, who I think we all know he's superb out of possession. We know he's a great presser. He'll lead the line really well in that regard. I think his on the ball is often a little bit overlooked because of how good he is without it. But I think he's probably, of the three, far more comfortable receiving the ball in like tighter areas.
Yeah.
And yeah, against some of those teams where we need to, there's not going to be that space to exploit in behind. Maybe it would suit that particular game to play Ben House as well as Freddie Draper. I think Freddie Draper starts all the time because I think no one likes to defend against that. But with Taylor, if there isn't the space in behind to exploit, it kind of nullifies a lot of his threat, doesn't it? So, but to be able to then have this on as an option, because, you know, if let's imagine we're playing against, I don't know, let's say Fleetwood, for example, we go 1-0 up, 60 minutes in, they're 1-0 down, they're chasing the game, they're fighting for their lives, so they have to take more risks, they put more players forward, then creating space in behind. Right, Joe, on you come, mate.
Absolutely.
And in behind, and then that last half an hour he has a field day. It's just to be able to have that in a squad is great. So yeah, we'll wait a month and see, won't we?
Yeah,
but I wouldn't want the fact that I don't want to kind of say that I disagree with you and that Ben House deserves to start, because I love Ben House. But I also wouldn't want to say that he deserves to stay ahead of these two at the moment either. Even in a month's time when he's fully fit, I think it depends very much on how these two do. There's no denying that. You know, we haven't seen a huge amount from them yet in terms of goal output, even though we've seen a real positive in regards to their overall performance. But Ben, of course, when fit, I think is going to be very much in the conversation. And then, of course, you've gone for Danny Mandroya on the right-hand side. Now, again, I think this is a little bit horses for courses, because that right midfield role against Peterborough and Derby was very much, in my opinion, there so that Ethan Hamilton could use his expert out of possession kind of energy, aggression to press a fullback. But it did limit us a little bit in our in possession play. When Ted came on there in the second half against Wickham, you know, I think he was really good on the ball. He kept hold of it. He committed Wickham players to create space for Lass on the overlap. It worked really nicely. And then you've got Danny Mandroya, who's going to be probably even more so. He'd be, I imagine the position he would take up would be higher up the pitch. He'd be a little bit more risky, I suppose, in his passing decisions. He will try and create something a little bit more. So I think our three options that can play in that right side of midfield role would be Hamilton, who's probably the more aggressive out of possession, but slightly more limited in possession. You've got Mandroya, who's probably going to be the least effective out of possession of the three, but probably the most creative. And then you've got Ted, who for me he kind of gets a bit of both. I think Ted's on the ball ability is definitely what gets noticed more than his off the ball ability. But I actually think his off the ball stuff is a little bit better than people give him credit for. I think the fact he picks up a few injuries just makes people assume that he's, for want of a better word, weak in the challenge and kind of avoiding those physical confrontations. But I don't feel like that's the case at all. I think he does get himself stuck in. We don't notice that side of it as much as you'd say an Ethan Hamilton, because he's kind of excellent to that, and that's a big part of his game. But I think because Ted's on-ball ability is so good, his off-ball is maybe overlooked at times. Of course, there's a question mark over Ted's for Saturday, isn't there, against Burton, and we know that it's very difficult to trust Ted's availability, and that's by no fault of anyone's. So your 11 probably is what's a longer-term solution, but what is my preferred 11 for the coming month in terms of the evidence that we've had over the last month? I went for Ted, but I completely understand why you've gone for Danny Mandroya there.
Now, let's have a little look then at the stats between the two. Now, these are a selection of stats in terms of both on the ball work and off the ball work. These are stats per 90 purely for this season. Ted Bishop versus Danny Mandroya. Now, obviously, the caveats to this, they have played different roles when they have played, and they've played different amounts of minutes and all of this. But, you know, shots, Danny Mandroya slightly edges it. Shot assists, so a pass that leads to a shot by a teammate. Ted Bishop actually slightly edges that one. Touches in the box, Ted Bishop slightly edges it. Dribbles, Danny Mandroya slightly edges it. Percentage success, Ted Bishop slightly edges that one. Ball losses, Danny Mandroya loses the ball more than what Ted Bishop does. And Ted Bishop's pass success percentage is also higher than DM's. Recoveries, Ted Bishop, we've spoken about his off-the-ball work. He's able to recover the ball a lot more. That is a huge discrepancy between him and Danny Mandroy. But again, part of that is down to the roles that they have played. And then interceptions. Ted Bishop has had more interceptions than Danny Mandroy. Now, Chris, I'm sure you're gonna go for a bit of a deep dive into some of these stats and kind of help explain some of these. But just before you do, now obviously I've put Danny Mandroy, and people probably now are looking and laughing at me, thinking, "Why the hell have you picked Danny Mandroy?" Now, first of all, picked him before we actually did this comparison. Before I made this graphic, I'd already picked him, and I'm a stubborn git, so I wasn't backing down. But it was also, I think some of the intangibles for Danny Mandroy are better than for Ted Bishop. Now, what I mean by that is Ted Bishop, I don't want to get sucked in to loving Ted Bishop after 2 games again, because I've done that far too often during his Lincoln City career to then struggle to really see much out of it over the next few matches in the longer term. Obviously, we also know, for example, his injury record hasn't exactly been the best, and I also believe he's a doubt for this Saturday as well. So hopefully that isn't, he's not out, and we have at least got him as an option whether I want him to be starting or not. The reason I've also picked Danny Mandroy is I think some of the matches that we've got coming up, starting with Burton away on Saturday, I think we're going to want to make sure that in possession it is more of a central number 10 rather than more of a sort of joint number 8 alongside somebody like an Ethan Hamilton, for example. I would much prefer him to be a little bit more further forward. And I just think that Danny Mandroy, who sat in that position, is going to be better than Ted Bishop in terms of a longer term. I made the point when Danny Mandroy got suspended, actually, against Bolton. It was me and Gaz on the podcast. And I very much sort of made the point that Danny Mandroy is the sort of player who will stand out in a great side. He won't stand out in an average side. And that doesn't mean that I'm saying he'll stand out because he's crap. Total opposite. He'll stand out because his technical ability on the ball, when he's surrounded by other players similar, when he's surrounded by players or got strikers in front of him that are able to put balls in the back of the net or drag defenders away, those sorts of things that you don't necessarily see often enough, and we haven't really seen it enough this season. Those are the sorts of things that I think Danny Mandroy is going to be fantastic at, and those are the sorts of teams and games where he's going to stand out in. And I think we're starting to move towards that slightly more attacking side. We've got the best players, sort of our roster available again, or most of them anyway. And now I think he's going to be given that opportunity, should be given that opportunity to stand out. And I think he's going to be able to take it. There's also the point, he may have a bit of a point to prove. Who knows what both of their futures hold after the summer. I wouldn't be too surprised that both of them are out of contract, I believe. Now, if that is the case, I think if over the next 6 months one performs unbelievably well and gets, and ends up being the player of the second half of the season, I mean, personally, I think that would be more likely to be Danny Mandroy. And if that is, I think he's more likely the one out of the two to get another contract rather than Ted Bishop personally. But I don't know. None of us know. We can all just sit here and speculate. So like I say, although the stats maybe show that Danny Mandroy isn't the better player on paper than Ted Bishop, I think going forward he very much could be.
Well, that's a lot to kind of touch on there, but I think, I'm obviously going to defend my decision to pick Ted. But firstly, I want to just offer a little bit of context and maybe a little bit of balance, because I agree with you in that Danny Mandroy is probably our most creative player. And I think we saw that when he came on against Peterborough, albeit a cameo performance. Everyone's going to remember his attempt. Didn't quite go in, but he got in a good position. But one thing that jumps out to me is, I think it was Lass he laid off, but it was a really smart pass. Yeah. The sort of pass that I genuinely don't think anyone else on the pitch, or none of our players would see, let alone be able to pull off. I think it was a first-time pass. He opened his body up, just laid it in perfect weight. And that's that little bit of quality that Danny Mandroy does give you. Mm-hmm. And like you say, coming against teams now who you'd like to think we're going to try and kind of imprint ourselves on in a little bit and impose ourselves, and want us to take that kind of front foot, then you want to have players that are able to play those kind of creative passes. But I'd also argue that can be a real threat off the bench when the opposition is kind of fatigued as well. So of course, looking at the stats themselves, the numbers alone, I think Ted does kind of come out on top here. I think what's worth bearing in mind though is that even though that we are comparing these two directly in regards to who's going to fit that particular role in the team now most suitably, these stats are kind of reflecting times throughout the season where they've played in different roles. Ted has generally been coming on in a central or a wider role, but not in the same role, not normally in the same role that Danny's been playing. Danny's either been playing up top or out wide, and Ted's generally playing kind of slightly deeper. So the fact that Ted has a slightly higher success rate of his passing makes sense because he's going to have a little bit more space to play. And the fact he's got more recoveries makes sense because he's playing a bit deeper, so he's going to be in those positions to make those recoveries. But I would like to kind of go back to my comparison of Ethan Hamilton and Danny as well in that wide right role. That's difficult to say, isn't it? And I think you've got two extremes there. I think you've got Ethan Hamilton, who's great out of possession, not so good in it in that particular role, and you've got Danny, who'd be brilliant in possession, but maybe not quite so effective in it. And then for me, Ted is just the best of both worlds. You know, he's not as good as Danny is, not far off, but I don't think he's as good as Danny in terms of his vision and his passing. He's great at driving with the ball. He's good at looking after the ball, but in terms of actually trying to create something, I think Danny's got that in terms of his vision. But I also think that Ted is not far away from that, and I also think Ted is decent out of possession as well in terms of his kind of combativeness as well. So for me, I've gone for Ted because it's kind of, yes, we are looking to head towards that more attacking output, but it's just neither of those two extremes that Hamilton and Manu offers in that role. It just adds a bit more balance. And of course, we've still got Conor McGrandles now to come back into the squad, and he may fit in one of these roles somewhere along the lines as well. We don't know that, do we? But for me, Ted wins, but Danny's close, and I would love to see Danny come on in that role, and I genuinely would love to see Danny make that role his own, because I think most of us believe that Ted is out of contract in the summer. I don't know about Danny. Genuinely, I don't know. He might be, he might not. I don't know. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see. But for me, Ted just gets the nod, but only just.
It really is close, isn't it? And there's another thing that has been quite close this month, and that are our Player of the Month selections. And here they are, then, the Player of the Month. I'm really proud of that segue. We're on the Stacey West. We have to mention the segue when we do them. Otherwise, is it really a segue, Chris? Now, we've got a couple of new graphics for the Player of the Month this month. I was going to say this season. No, this month. So it's not just going to be the player. We've also got a little quote that Chris sent me about not just who he's picked, but why he's picked the player. Now, I mean, people can read, Chris, but why don't you enlighten us as to, first of all, who you picked and why?
It was tough again. It's been tough every month, to be honest, but it's getting tougher because we're playing well now. And Alex Mitchell, personally, has been amazing this month. I think he's pushed on another level, and he was so close to this for me. He really was so close. Last time Paulie was available, I selected to put Paulie back into the team, mainly because of the fact that he was a captain. He's our player, he's not on loan. Whereas this time round, I actually think Alex has stepped up and is kind of undroppable at the moment. So just a mention there to Alex Mitchell, because I think he has been absolutely superb. And it does seem to be our centre-backs that are getting a lot of the plaudits at the moment, and rightly so. I just think Ethan Arahan has... Going under the radar and Ethan Arahan don't really go together, because I think we all notice him. But I think because of how well our centre-backs have performed, it's kind of almost just expected from Ethan. And sometimes, like when you listen to the opposition commentary, that gives you a really good indication of what sort of players you have on your hands. And in every game that he's played this month, primarily the last three, obviously scoring against Wickham, but he was superb against Wickham in all manner of the game. He won the ball back, I think, more than anyone on the pitch. He had, I think, the second highest number of successful passes of anyone on the pitch, I think. And of course, he scored the equaliser as well. But I just think he was the best midfielder on show against both Peterborough and Derby. And with the players that they had on the pitch, I think that goes to say a hell of a lot. And last game against Peterborough, there was a guy that's just moved into my village quite recently, moved up from London. He came along to watch Lincoln for the first time on Saturday against Peterborough. Obviously, he's not a Lincoln fan. He might end up being one. You never know. Hopefully, he'll come back. But he just wanted to experience what his new local team was. And I gave him a lift. And on the way back, he said, "Oh my God, that number 6 was the best player on the pitch. He just dictated everything. He won it back a million times. Like, how old is he? Where did he get him from? Is he on loan from a Premier League team?" I was like, "No, he's ours. We signed him from St Mirren." And yeah, he is that good, isn't he? So I just think Ethan Rahan has been superb. I think he is. I don't know how this is possible, but I think he's underrated. Even though, because I just think we take it for granted what he does. He just provides such a platform for everything to kind of go on ahead of him. And I also think it's worth pointing out that he's playing in a pivot on his own now. Ever since he signed for the club, he was part of a double pivot. And now he's basically a single pivot. And if anything, he's grown in stature in that regard. He's really just taken ownership of that part of the pitch. And yeah, I just think he's absolutely superb. I love him to bits. Best player in the world, isn't he?
Obviously. Absolutely. Do you know what? He uses calmness. Yeah. When Ethan Aaron has the ball in the middle of the park, you're just calm and composed and confident that we're not going to be losing the ball stupidly. There's not going to be any kind of irrationality in there. It gives you that mini kind of break from what could normally be sort of a heart attack of a game at Centre Bank, for example. And it just gives you that little bit of a break and a breather whenever Ethan Aaron has the ball. And that's something that you can't train. It's just so good the way that he plays, and he will, without a shadow of a doubt, be playing in the Premier League at some point within the next few years. Who knows? Maybe with those. Yeah, okay. Well, I'm not going to get ahead of myself. Right, my player of the month, and you mentioned him, and I was torn, absolutely torn between picking Alex and Adam Jackson, because Jacko has been absolutely outstanding this last month. But little sneak preview, somebody else picked Adam Jackson, so it kind of just freed up that so that I could pick Alex. So it's like, okay, well, Adam Jackson's still going to get the kind of plaudits as he rightfully should. But look, Alex Mitchell, absolutely exceptional at the back. Again, he's somebody that just oozes confidence. And you know what? What stood out for me is actually his ability on the ball recently, because first of all, his kind of warrior defensive ability shines through. Of course it does. He's fantastic at that. But also, when he's had the ball at his feet, he's also looked nice and composed. He's been able to pick out a pass, whether that be short or sometimes a little bit longer. Yes, okay, sometimes, but then he's also known when to clear it when it needs clearing, rather than trying to overplay it, which I think is an issue we've had with centre backs over the past few years at certain points. I think back to, for example, Michael Appleton's first season with us, where we wanted to try and play out from the back a lot more, and with Jason Shackle and the like, and that just did not work at all. But doing that. But I think Alex Mitchell's actually got that ability. And it's something I said when I was up in Blackpool. We were recording the last monthly show about, I'm not quite sure about having him and Jacko next to each other in a back four, and just as the two centre halves. How's that going to work? It's worked fine. It's worked great. It's worked better than I could have imagined. So I'm really, really pleased with him. I have just put a little bit of a message at the bottom that Jez, you watch the deadline day. Hopefully you're watching this. Sign him up, please, because he 100% deserves to be a part of the Lincoln City squad next season. I think everybody has fallen in love with Alex Mitchell, and also the passion that he's showing as a lone player. Don't think I've seen a lone player that's shown this much passion for the football club in a long while. So huge, incredible asset he's been to us this season. Hopefully the rest of the second half of the season, he can do the exact same, obviously, as you very much alluded to, Chris. And I did mention it. Stacey West readers have picked Adam Jackson. You guys have chosen him. It was unbelievably tightly contested between Adam Jackson and Alex Mitchell. In fact, I'm not even 100% sure. Alex Mitchell may have also gone joint again, like he did with Ethan Hamilton last month. But Adam Jackson has been given it. What a warrior at the back this guy's been, Chris.
Yeah, under the radar again in regard to voting, and I'm guilty. The reason I've given Ethan Arahan the award this month was, you can say the same about why Adam could have won it. Is that it's just expected now. He's been so consistent. He's probably been our most consistent player for the whole season, regardless of opposition, system that we're playing, who the manager is. He's just been a rock, and he's been a calming influence. And he's been absolutely superb, but that seems to have pushed on into another level this last month. Obviously, when you're playing against big teams, you notice it a bit more. But I just think he's. I'll be honest, he's my player of the season so far.
Yeah.
Even though I don't think I've given him player of the month at any point yet, I just think it's his consistency that brings him to there. So it is no surprise to me at all that the Stacey West readers have voted for him there. And I think what's also interesting, because obviously you and I talk off air, these three were my top three, and they were your top three as well, weren't they, I think?
Yeah.
So, yeah, the order might be slightly different between the three of us, but ultimately, they pick themselves in a way. So yeah, it's great. He's a massive asset to the club. I was delighted when he signed a new deal in the summer, and he's, we've got another year of him yet after this one as a minimum. So I'm all for that.
It's huge, isn't it? And kind of just picking up on that. First of all, I've spoken a little bit today kind of about some of the intangibles and the off-the-field work of certain players. From what I can gather, Adam Jackson, he's our vice captain. He's been playing captain in recent weeks, but he is a true leader off the field. A real kind of calming influence for the younger lads. Someone who's been able to be a real mentor and just guide them in things, even not just on the training pitch, but also in terms of some of their things off the field. And that's exactly what you want out of the experience in the squad. And it's something that obviously Skubala has been kind of banging on about over the past month during the January transfer window. We want experience. It'll just help bring some of the younger lads through, and it just helps them with kind of having that influence and role model in the dressing room. And I think that's exactly what Adam Jackson is. And also in regards to obviously him signing a new deal in the summer, when we had our evening with Jez George, obviously in September, he turned around and made a comment along the lines of getting Adam Jackson on a 2-year contract extension. That was like a new signing. That meant that we didn't have to go out and frantically replace one of the best players in the squad. That is what he can bring. Now, he had this kind of wrapped in glass sort of reputation, wrapped in glass, made of glass reputation, and had to be sort of wrapped up in bubble wrap and such. But that isn't turning out to be the case this season. I believe he's one of our highest appearance holders and one of our highest minutes played.
The highest appearance holder now.
I'm going to say yes. I was under the same impression, but I didn't just want to say that just in case I was wrong. So yes, Adam Jackson, wholly deserved from the Stacey West readers, as is Alex Mitchell and Ethan Arahan from our picks. And obviously they're also going to be the top three for the readers as well. Now, we've had a little bit of a review of the month. We are quite a long while in. Wow, well over an hour now, Chris. So let's begin to wrap it up by looking ahead at the month of February for the Imps. And here they are then, 6 matches to be played. We have got a rearranged game in there now at the very end of the month with Shrewsbury at home. But before that, we travel to Burton Albion this coming Saturday, followed by back-to-back Saturday home games with Fleetwood and Exeter, with Charlton Athletic away on the Tuesday night in the middle of that week, and Port Vale away on the 24th of February as well. So that's 2 Tuesday nights during this month, 4 Saturday matches, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, I can count 4 Saturday matches. On paper, although there's more games, a little bit of an easier month than the month of January. But Chris, I guess the sort of starting point is what are we hoping for / expecting in terms of points haul?
2 points a game. I think we can show playoff form against this opposition. Because look at this, you can go into each of these games genuinely thinking we could win this. It's unrealistic to expect us to pick up, that many points, of course. But if you pick up 2 points a game throughout the season, you're in the playoffs. Everyone kind of generally uses that as or you get promoted. Sorry, should I say? And I'm not saying that that's how the form that we're going to show until the end of the season, but against in this little 6-game stretch, I expect us to pick up 2 points a game minimum. I really do think we've got the potential to do that. And as I said earlier, I'm confident about these games. You're a little bit more cautious about, was the last couple of games a bit of a false dawn, just like it was after the Cambridge game, potentially. So I think there's definitely a big month for that reason, because this is all speculation at the moment. We haven't won yet since November. Provided we can get over the line against Burton, which I feel we've got the tools to do so, despite them being improved under their recent new manager appointment in Mike Patterson. If we can get that win against Burton, I really think we can kick on this month and get some positive performances. So yeah, I'm going to go with 12 points.
Right, okay. Well, I'm going to just take it game by game first. Burton Albion. I'm going to go with either a very narrow Lincoln victory or a draw. Now, I'd like to think that we can go there and win, but I'm not going to get ahead of myself too quickly. And to be fair, I actually think if we can get a draw or a narrow, I'd be reasonably happy, obviously, if we get a narrow victory. Great. Same 3 points as you'd get for a thumping victory. So that's great. Fleetwood, for me, is going to be the game where we really set down our mark for the second half of the season of look at what we can do. For me, we're going to get a 3 or 4-0 victory. Out there, maybe, but genuinely think that that's something that we can do against a struggling Fleetwood side. Let's not deny that. They also lost a few players yesterday. They brought in some, but I'm not quite sure whether they're really up to replacing some of the players that they've let go. I'm going to say that's going to be our big victory, that big sort of not necessarily turning point, but that big statement match under Michael Scapala and this new look side. Charlton Athletic away. I'll be cautious and I predict a draw, but I think there could be an opportunity to get something out of that.
Exeter, that's an interesting one, isn't it? Because there's a lot of uncertainty about Charlton at the moment. Obviously, they're managers at the moment. We expect them to have someone in charge by then. They signed a lot of players in the window, but they lost Corey Blackett-Taylor, which was one of their best players. Well, probably is their best player. I know Alfred Mason popping the ball in the net, but Corey Blackett-Taylor's basically been putting every single chance of his on the rolling it across the 6-yard box for him to tap it in. So, Charlton's a really interesting one because they have got good players, and if they've got a decent manager in charge and they start to have a bit of a bounce, that could be a challenging fixture. But right now, you think you could go there and win. So it's strange, isn't it, that one?
It is, and I also don't believe that Conor McGrandles is going to be able to be in the squad for that match either, if I'm not mistaken. So, we will be a man short. Obviously, we don't quite know what his impact's going to be in terms of these matches coming up, but you never want to be dictated to who you can and can't put in the squad, and that's a game where, I think it's the game that would be most likely to lose out of the 6, but obviously, hopefully, we can get something down at the Valley. Exeter at home, I think we can pick up something in that one as well. I think Gary Caldwell has very much picked up the form with Exeter in terms of recently compared to the horrendous run that they had where, they only picked up, 3 points in something like 12 matches. And one of those points being a draw at home to Lincoln, but we'll ignore that. Port Vale away. Port Vale's an interesting one because they're a side that haven't necessarily hit lofty heights or anything daft like that this season, but they've recruited really, really well in this January transfer window. I think some of the players they've brought in, obviously Dan Gore, midfielder, who's played Premier League minutes for Manchester United, and you've also got Alex Mighton, who's also played Premier League minutes for Nottingham Forest, granted, not this season. That was last season against Newcastle on the opening day, I believe. Someone who I'm certain we've been linked with before as well. So that they could potentially be a bit tough. So I'll say a draw for that one. Shrewsbury at home. Again, I loved, and I think that we'll be able to get a win. So let's say that we get that narrow victory against Burton and we do get a loss, I'm going to say, against Charlton. Then just to try and balance it out a little bit, then, we'll be looking at 3, 6, 0 from Charlton, 9 if we include next time. I'm going to say 1 away at Port Vale, 10. There's a possibility of 13 points would be what I predict, with kind of a low end of maybe 10 or 11. There is a top end of 18. I think a top end in terms of a realistic aim for me would probably be about 14, 15. But yeah, I think that Fleetwood one is very much the one I'm aiming for, that next home match. that can be a real statement game. Which is the one that you're most looking forward to, Chris, whether that be for on the field stuff or off the field?
Probably Burton. Fleetwood for the reason that you said, but I think how we play against Burton will dictate how we go into that Fleetwood game. Burton's big. Burton's really big because if we can go into that and perform to the level that I believe that we are capable of doing and show the strengths that I believe that we have, then it's kind of, on a purely personal note, just kind of confirmation that my confidence was probably reasonably well placed. If we struggle against Burton, then I think I might need to rethink that level of positivity that I have. So yeah, for me, it's Burton. Burton's a big one, and fingers crossed, it's a really positive performance. Fingers crossed, it's also, of course, most importantly, a positive result. And from there, hopefully, we can then really kick on this month. I really do feel if we can beat Burton, we can pick up a good few wins here. I think we can go unbeaten this month.
I think there's definitely the possibility of that. I really, really do. I'm very much going to agree with you. Like I said, I think Charlton's the one that if we're going to lose any, Charlton's the only one where I think it wouldn't be a shock, not a shock because you're still going down there hoping and potentially after these two matches expecting something out of Charlton. I think if you're looking at it on paper at the minute, Charlton is the toughest of the
of course.
Their league position is a little bit deceiving as well because I think they've got a squad to be much higher. They just haven't necessarily gone well, obviously under Michael Appleton.
That's absolutely the point. Is that this has been this month is almost like marketed as 6 games against teams lower than us in the table, and none of them are surprising, and you'd expect them to be apart from Cheltenham. You think, what, they're below us? What? How's that possible? And it's because they've been on a horrific run, but the quality in their squad is definitely significantly higher than a lot of the others here that you have mentioned. That Port Vale have, of course, recruited quite well. Burton have recruited well in regards to they've replaced their whole front line, but a lot of it came through yesterday. So, I'm still confident. I'm still confident. But yeah, Charlton's the one that I think will be the most challenging. But football never goes to exactly to plan, does it? It doesn't go in the pattern that you think it's going to be. That's why we all love it so much. But ultimately, this has a real potential to be a good month for us, and hopefully the start of a really positive end to the season.
Absolutely agreed. And look, hopefully, as we get rid of the fixtures, we do that. Oh no, not that one. We do that so that you can see more of. Oh, sorry, guys. God, Chris, I didn't realise you looked quite that bad up close. So I really can't say that, can I? No, look. The month of January has certainly been an interesting one. There has been a lot of positivity in and around the club. There's a lot of optimism for the future. We just need to start putting that onto paper and in results as well. Who knows? February could be the kickstart month to do that. Chris, thank you so much for joining me. I can't wait till next month.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Absolute pleasure as always, mate. Can't wait for February. Up the Imps.
Up the Imps.